There's a moment that doesn't get talked about much, not because it's rare, but because it doesn't announce itself. It's the moment when something starts changing before you know what it's changing into. Nothing has happened yet. At least, nothing you could point to. If someone asked, you'd say things were fine, normal, about the same, and that would be true. But internally, something has already shifted, just enough to register, not as alarm, not as certainty, more like a quiet adjustment in how closely you're paying attention. You don't call it a sign. You don't call it a feeling. You just notice yourself becoming slightly more aware of things you didn't track before. Tone, timing, the way certain moments land. At first, you assume it's temporary, a mood, a phase. You don't stop. You don't confront anything. You continue, just with a little more care than usual. And that care feels reasonable. It doesn't feel like hesitation. It feels like being thoughtful. You start explaining things to yourself in small ways, not to justify, just to keep the story smooth. You fill in gaps. You add context. You say things like, "It's probably nothing," or "This makes sense, actually." And it does, from the inside. There's no moment where you decide to lower your expectations. That's not how it happens. You just stop anticipating certain things as strongly as you used to. You don't notice the change at first because nothing feels lost. You're not disappointed, you're adjusting. You call it flexibility, maturity, being realistic. And those words fit well enough that you don't look any closer. At some point, silence starts appearing more often. Not dramatic silence. Not the kind that demands attention. Just longer spaces between things. At first, you notice them. Then you stop. They blend into the rhythm. Silence doesn't arrive suddenly. It stays long enough to stop feeling new. You don't label it absence. You treat it like part of the environment, like something you work around instead of something you question. You realize you've started managing more than participating. You're tracking reactions, adjusting timing, choosing words carefully. Not because you're trying to control anything, but because it keeps things steady. It feels responsible. It feels like you're being considerate, and maybe you are, but there's a subtle difference between being inside something and monitoring it from just outside. You don't name that difference yet. You just notice that effort feels quieter than it used to. You still show up the same way, still apply the same care. But sometimes it doesn't register. There's no reaction, no shift. You don't take it personally, not yet. You tell yourself that not everything needs a response, that effort isn't always visible. That's true. So you keep going. At some point, a question you used to carry is no longer there. You don't remember setting it down. It isn't answered. It's just absent. You don't replace it with certainty. You simply stop reaching for it. That feels easier than holding something open that never seems to move closer to clarity. You notice your energy change before anything else does. Not drastically, just slightly. Things that used to feel light now take more effort. You adjust your pace without thinking about why. You don't trace it back. You don't analyze it. You just notice the shift and move with it. At some point, acceptance shows up before understanding does. Not agreement, not peace. Just a quiet lowering of resistance. You stop pushing against what's there, not because you've decided anything, but because pushing feels louder than staying still. Acceptance doesn't answer questions. It creates space. And in that space, nothing becomes obvious yet. You're still inside the moment before clarity arrives. Still in the part where things are felt but not named. Still early enough that you could move in any direction without knowing which one matters. This isn't the moment of realization. It's the moment before that. The one that only makes sense later, after you've already passed through it. But right now, it just feels like awareness, quiet, unfinished, and not yet asking to be understood.